You told yourself it would be different this time, but here you are, hurt again by someone who barely showed up. Why do you keep falling for the same kind of person even when you know how it ends? In the next few minutes, you'll understand why certain people feel so magnetic and why your heart keeps chasing pain dressed up as love. We'll unpack the 5 exact types of people your wounds keep pulling you toward, and how to finally stop calling pain love. These aren't accidents. They're echoes of what your childhood never resolved. And the people you attract, they're not your missing piece. They're your unfinished business. This isn't love, it's repetition. And it's time to end it. You meet someone. They're soft-spoken, thoughtful, maybe even a little mysterious. They don't overwhelm you. They don't pressure you. They feel safe, quiet, almost distant, but in a strangely familiar way. In the beginning, this distance feels intriguing. It gives you space. It gives you room to fantasize, to fill in the blanks. You tell yourself, they're just shy, or they've been through a lot, or they just need time. But time passes, and the emotional distance stays. They don't open up. They disappear in conversations. They vanish when things get real. You try harder. You reach more. You explain, support, accommodate. But the more you give, the less you receive. This is the first archetype, the emotional ghost. Someone who's physically present but emotionally absent. Someone whose silence echoes louder than any fight ever could. You don't attract the emotional ghost by chance. You attract them because, deep down, you've made peace with emptiness. Not consciously, but unconsciously. Maybe you grew up with a parent who was always distracted, a father lost in work, a mother consumed by anxiety. You learned early that emotional needs were a burden. That affection had to be earned. That love, if it came at all, would be unpredictable, unreliable, inconsistent. And so your nervous system began to associate distance with safety, silence with peace, absence with love. In Jungian terms, this is the projection of the inner wound. Your unconscious seeks out what it already knows, not because it's good for you, but because it's familiar. Familiarity often masquerades as chemistry, and the soul confuses what is known with what is safe. The emotional ghost doesn't hurt you by being cruel. They hurt you by being gone. You crave a connection that feels real, not dramatic, not chaotic, just real. But their presence flickers in and out like an old radio signal. They respond to your texts. Hours later, they show up, but only halfway. They listen, but never reveal. You're always on the verge of something meaningful, but never quite there. This dynamic becomes addictive because your psyche sees a challenge. If I can finally make them open up, maybe I'll finally feel worthy. Maybe I'll prove that I matter. But their silence is not a test. It's a pattern. And until you heal the wound that taught you to chase affection, you will keep attracting people who make you work for something that should be freely given. Let's pause here. What does it actually mean to be emotionally present? It means someone sees you, not just the version of you that's smiling or successful, but the version that's tired, anxious, afraid. It means someone engages with you in moments of discomfort, rather than withdrawing into silence. It means mutual effort. It means safety. It means clarity. The emotional ghost is terrified of this, not because they're malicious, but because they also carry wounds. Perhaps they were punished for expressing feelings. Perhaps they were never taught emotional language. Perhaps their own ghosts still haunt them. But here's the crucial truth. You are not responsible for excavating someone else's emotional depth. You are not here to unlock someone's heart with enough patience, enough love, enough sacrifice. That's not intimacy. That's codependency. In Jungian terms, the emotional ghost often represents an unintegrated animus or anima, a psychological projection of what we think we need from the opposite energy we lack within ourselves. You don't need someone to complete you. You need to reclaim the part of yourself that believes love only comes through struggle. And that means healing the part of you that thinks absence is normal. Ask yourself, do I confuse mystery with depth? Do I feel more desire when someone pulls away? Do I believe that love must be earned through patience and sacrifice? If the answer is yes, you're not broken. You're just reenacting a familiar script, and the moment you become aware of it, the script begins to change. You start recognizing the early signs of emotional unavailability. You begin to feel discomfort when someone is vague, inconsistent, withholding, and you stop rationalizing red flags as potential. You begin asking different questions. Not, how do I make them stay? But why am I attracted to someone who isn't fully here? Not, how do I fix this? But what part of me feels safer with distance than with true intimacy? This is shadow work. This is the painful but liberating truth. Sometimes you attract the emotionally unavailable because a part of you is emotionally starving, and you've learned to call that hunger love. Healing from the emotional ghost begins with choosing presence, starting with yourself. Can you sit with your own sadness without pushing it aside? Can you meet your own needs instead of outsourcing them to someone else? Can you become emotionally available to you? When you do, something subtle shifts. You stop chasing people who vanish. You stop confusing effort with love. You stop mistaking silence for peace. And you begin creating a new standard, one where love doesn't disappear when things get hard. One where emotional presence is not a reward, but a baseline. You deserve someone who doesn't vanish, someone who shows up, not perfectly, but fully. Someone who speaks when it's hard. Someone who sees you and stays. But before you find them, you must become someone who believes they're worth that kind of love. The ghost will only leave when you stop trying to hold on to them, and in their absence, something stronger will finally have space to enter. Connection, clarity, truth, and love. The kind that stays. At first they seem perfect, charismatic, confident, enigmatic. They make you feel special, seen, chosen, like no one ever has. They mirror your best qualities. They laugh at your jokes. They say all the right things. And for a moment, it feels like you've found your soulmate. But slowly, the cracks begin to appear. Their attention shifts. Their admiration becomes control. The warmth turns cold without warning. And the person who once made you feel like everything now makes you feel like too much or not enough. This is the second archetype, the Mirror Narcissist. Someone who doesn't love you, but the reflection of themselves they see through you. To understand this archetype, we must understand projection. Carl Jung taught that what we reject in ourselves or cannot yet integrate gets projected onto others. But it works both ways. When you have a fragile sense of self, when your early wounds taught you that love must be earned through performance, charm, or perfection, you become fertile ground for someone who thrives on control and validation. And the mirror narcissist knows exactly how to reflect what you want to see. They're a master of emotional alchemy, not to deepen connection, but to reinforce their own image of power. In the beginning, this feels intoxicating, like love at first sight, like destiny. But it's not love, it's enmeshment. It's identity confusion, it's trauma bonding disguised as passion. The mirror narcissist senses your wounds and uses them like a script. They praise your depth until you express a boundary. Then you're called too sensitive. They admire your independence until you need reassurance. Then you're needy. They say you're not like the others. But the moment you challenge their illusion, you become just like everyone else. Their approval is conditional. Their affection is transactional. And yet, you stay, not because you're weak, but because deep down, the little child inside you still believes, if I'm perfect, maybe this time they won't leave. That child was taught that love requires shape-shifting, that it's not safe to just be. The mirror narcissist feeds off this wound. They don't necessarily know it consciously, but they instinctively sense the dynamic. They perform confidence. You perform worthiness. They demand loyalty. You give devotion. Until one day, you look in the mirror and no longer recognize yourself. You've been hollowed out by approval. You've outsourced your self-esteem. You've made their validation your identity. And yet it still never feels like enough. That's the trap. The mirror narcissist reflects what you want until you want too much of it. Then they retract. They idealize you, then devalue you. They raise you up, then silently let you fall. And you're left questioning your memory, your instincts, your worth. This is not love. This is psychological erosion. So why do you attract them? Because your inner self still equates love with performance. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that being seen meant being used. Because attention felt like affection. Because admiration felt like intimacy. But admiration is not intimacy. Performance is not presence. And validation is not love. In Jungian terms, the mirror narcissist activates the wounded persona, the false self we create to survive in the world. You attract them when you're still clinging to a self-image rather than your true self. They appeal to the mask. They seduce the performer. They don't fall in love with your essence. They attach to your function. You're not seen as a person. You're seen as a supply, emotional fuel for their identity. And the only way to break this cycle is to take off the mask. Healing begins when you stop asking, why won't they love me? And start asking, why do I keep needing love from someone who can't offer it? You begin the difficult, brave work of turning inward. You reclaim the parts of yourself you gave away. You sit with your wounds, not to indulge them, but to understand them. You stop performing and start listening. You learn that it's better to be alone in truth than adored in illusion. Ask yourself, do I feel a strong need to impress in relationships? Do I feel like I'm walking on eggshells with certain people? Do I stay in connections that feel emotionally unsafe, just to avoid feeling rejected? If the answer is yes, you're not broken. You've simply been caught in a mirror, and the only way to escape it is to stop looking out and start looking in. You'll know you're healing when you stop craving validation from those who refuse to give it. You stop chasing people who punish your vulnerability. You stop trading authenticity for admiration. You'll know you're healing when you no longer confuse being chosen with being loved. Because being chosen often means fitting into someone else's fantasy. Being loved means being fully seen, flaws, fears, depth, and all, and still embraced. The mirror narcissist will always want more of your performance, but the right person will want more of your presence. You are not here to be someone's reflection. You are here to be real, and the more you choose authenticity, the more those mirrors will crack and fall away, leaving only truth and the beginning of something real. They arrive like a balm, calm, attentive, always available. They know what you need before you ask. They listen, they comfort, they offer solutions. You feel held, finally, seen, cared for. They say things like, "You've just had bad luck. You deserve so much better. Let me take care of it." And for a while, it feels like love, because love for you has always been tangled with rescue. This is the third archetype, the fixer, the one who unconsciously confirms your belief that you are broken and that only someone else's love can make you whole. On the surface, this dynamic looks beautiful. They give, you receive, they support, you soften, they solve, you lean in. But underneath, a dangerous illusion is growing, the illusion that your worth depends on being helped, that love only arrives when you're struggling, that being in need is the surest way to be close to someone. This isn't your fault. It's a wound born from childhood moments where love was conditional, where affection came when you were sick, small, crying, where strength was ignored, but weakness brought attention. Over time, your nervous system wired itself for dependency. You internalized a quiet belief. If I'm okay, I'll be left alone. But if I'm hurting, someone might stay. Enter the fixer. They mean well, usually. They love feeling needed. They find identity in being the one who saves, guides, rescues. Their purpose thrives in your pain, and so the dynamic forms. They need someone to fix. You've learned to feel safe in being fixed. This feels like compatibility, but it's actually codependence. You're not partners, you're roles. They are the healer. You are the wound. In Jungian terms, this is the collision of shadow and persona. Your shadow carries the part of you that feels helpless, the part you try to suppress. Their persona is built on being capable, strong, and self-sacrificing, often at their own expense. But here's the paradox. The more they rescue you, the more you stay small. The more you rely on them, the less you trust yourself. The more they help you cope, the less you grow. Eventually, this dynamic suffocates both of you. You begin to resent their control. They begin to resent your dependence. What began as love turns into quiet frustration. Not because either of you is bad, but because the relationship was built on imbalance, not equality. The fixer may be generous, but they often struggle with boundaries. They overextend, then burn out. They expect unspoken loyalty. They may guilt you for needing less or for becoming stronger, because your strength threatens their role. If you heal, they lose their purpose. And this reveals the deeper truth. The fixer doesn't just want to love you, they want to matter to you. But when love is based on imbalance, it eventually collapses. Ask yourself, do I feel most connected to others when I'm struggling? Do I secretly fear that if I grow, people will leave? Do I equate receiving help with being loved? If so, your wound isn't weakness. It's a forgotten belief that love must be earned through suffering, that to be cared for, you must be incomplete. But love is not something you qualify for by hurting. Love is not earned through lack. It's offered in wholeness. Healing from the fixer dynamic begins with radical responsibility, not self-blame, but self-ownership. You begin to ask, what part of me believes I'm not enough unless I'm being rescued? What would it feel like to be loved even when I'm thriving? And maybe most importantly, can I give myself the care I keep asking others for? You start to become your own emotional anchor. You develop inner resilience. You learn to receive support, not because you're helpless, but because you're human. And then something beautiful happens. You begin attracting a different kind of love, not one that seeks to fix, but one that celebrates your wholeness. A love where mutual growth replaces quiet dependency, where intimacy is built on truth, not roles, where being strong doesn't mean being alone, and being vulnerable doesn't mean being small. The fixer may always be drawn to people in need, but you no longer need to be the one needing. You begin to honor the part of you that used to scream for help. You cradle it gently, you listen to it, you thank it, and then you release it, because you are no longer a wound looking for a healer. You are a whole person, capable of both receiving and giving, not from emptiness, but from abundance. This is maturity. This is integration. This is healing. The fixer taught you something. They reminded you that you are lovable even in your mess. But now you get to learn something deeper, that you are lovable even in your strength, that you don't have to be broken to be loved. You can simply be, and someone will stay, not to fix you, but to walk beside you. They're exciting, spontaneous, alive. They make you feel like the world just opened up. Late night talks, deep stares, wild laughter, everything feels electric until it doesn't. One day, the tone shifts. They take longer to respond. They cancel plans. They say they need space. You ask what's wrong, and they say, nothing. You lean in, and they pull away. And before you can even understand what's happening, they're gone. No big argument, no explosion, just distance, sudden and hollow. This is the fourth archetype, the runner, the person who retreats the moment things become too real. At first, they seem available. They initiate, they pursue, they want to know everything about you, but it's not really you they want. It's the feeling of being connected without the weight of commitment. It's the high of closeness without the cost of vulnerability. Because vulnerability feels like danger. To them, love isn't safety, love is exposure, and exposure feels like a threat. Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." The runner embodies this truth. They are fleeing from something within themselves, a wound they've never touched, a fear they've never named. And intimacy? Intimacy threatens to reveal it. So when you begin to get close, when your presence starts to mirror their buried self, they run. Not because you're too much, but because you're too close. You attract the runner when you carry a wound of abandonment, when you fear being left so deeply that you chase before understanding, when inconsistency feels like love, because that's what you grew up with. If you had a parent who was unpredictable, emotionally hot and cold, loving one day and distant the next, then uncertainty became your normal. And in a strange, painful way, you find yourself drawn to it. You think, if I can just hold them, they'll stay. If I love them enough, they'll stop running. But love doesn't make someone stay, and chasing doesn't create closeness. It recreates the very fear you're trying to avoid. The runner is not evil. They are not cruel. They are wounded. They may long for love deeply, but they have learned that closeness equals danger, so they keep people at arm's length, just enough to feel connection, but not enough to feel seen. And the moment you see them, really see them, their defense mechanisms scream, "Get out, hide, retreat." This isn't about you. It's about their own soul screaming for space. But here's the painful irony. When you chase a runner, you abandon yourself. You start shrinking. You become careful with your words. You walk on emotional eggshells. You stop expressing your needs because you fear that any emotional weight will drive them away. And it might. But ask yourself, do I want a love that disappears when I'm honest? Do I want connection that only exists in lightness, never in depth? Do I want to keep proving that I'm not too much? If not, then the runner is not your mirror. They are your teacher. They're showing you the wound that still needs healing, the belief that you must be less in order to be loved. In Jungian terms, the runner represents an unintegrated shadow of vulnerability, both in themselves and sometimes in you. You may unconsciously avoid your own emotional truths by obsessing over someone else's distance. You make their absence the story so you don't have to face your own. But when you finally sit still, when you stop chasing, you begin to feel what's underneath. Loneliness, fear, the ache of never being fully held. And in that moment, something sacred happens. You begin holding yourself. Healing from the runner means choosing someone who stays. But first, you must stay. You must choose presence over pursuit, clarity over chaos, substance over spark. You stop glamorizing the chase. You stop making emotional withdrawal feel like mystery. You stop calling avoidance freedom, because freedom without intimacy is just isolation in disguise. You'll know you're healing when you no longer try to decode mixed signals. You stop romanticizing the unavailable. You begin craving peace more than passion. And when someone pulls away, you don't panic. You pause. You ask, is this how I want to feel long term? Is this a pattern or a partnership? And if it's a pattern, you walk away, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. There's a difference between someone needing time to grow and someone who's committed to staying hidden. You deserve more than glimpses of love. You deserve more than proximity without presence. You deserve someone who stays when things get quiet, who leans in when life gets hard, who sees you fully and doesn't flinch. And before you find them, you must become someone who no longer runs from your own heart. The runner taught you something important, that you still feared being too much, that you still chase love to avoid your own emptiness, that you still confused intensity with intimacy. But now, you get to choose something else, a slower love, a safer love, a steady love, the kind that doesn't leave when you reveal your truth, the kind that meets you not just in laughter, but in silence, and stays. They light up every room, charming, energetic, effortlessly likable. They're the life of the party, the one everyone turns to, the one who always knows the right thing to say. But something about them feels rehearsed. Their smiles never reach their eyes. Their stories feel polished, too perfect. Their presence is captivating, but somehow distant. You feel close to them, but not inside them, like they've built a beautiful glass house. and you're always watching from the outside. This is the fifth archetype, the performer, the person who seeks love through identity, through image, approval, and constant becoming. At first, it feels like a dream. They reflect back the version of yourself you want to be. They're successful, admired. They're driven, passionate, magnetic. They hold you with charisma, compliment you endlessly. But over time, it starts to feel hollow because you're not sure who you're loving, them or the version of themselves they want you to love. And maybe you realize that's how you've lived too. You keep attracting the performer because you are, or once were, one yourself. Someone who had to become lovable to survive. Someone who believed that authenticity was too dangerous. That being real meant being rejected, so instead, you performed. This wound often begins early. If you grew up in an environment where approval was conditional on grades, behavior, looks, success, then you learned that love isn't something you receive by default. It's something you must earn. So you shapeshift, you adapt, you read the room and become what it needs. You anticipate others' expectations. You shine not because it's your nature, but because it keeps you safe. You become excellent, but not free. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to navigate the world. It's not inherently bad. We all need personas to function, to work, to connect socially. But the trouble begins when the persona becomes your prison. When you've worn the mask so long, you begin to believe you are the mask. And then you attract others who fall in love with that mask. They love the version of you that never complains, the one who's always funny, always confident, always fine. They love your strength, but not your softness. They admire your drive, but not your fatigue. They praise your performance, but don't notice your pain. And slowly, you begin to disappear. The performer often avoids intimacy through perfection. They're terrified of being ordinary, of being boring, of being seen in stillness. So they stay busy. They stay on. They entertain, impress, dazzle, and silently hope that someone, someday, will see through the performance and still stay. But they never let it happen, because they fear that if someone sees beneath the mask, they'll walk away. And so they live alone, surrounded by people. If you've attracted performers, ask yourself, do I seek people who impress me more than people who make me feel safe? Do I hide my own truth, hoping someone else will finally validate it? Do I feel like I must always show up as my best self, even when I'm hurting? If yes, you're not broken. You've just learned a version of love that rewards the mask more than the soul. But masks are heavy, and eventually they crack. Healing begins when you give yourself permission to be unremarkable, to be real, to stop entertaining and just exist. You stop over-explaining. You stop performing happiness. You sit in the quiet and listen. You realize that your worth is not in how much you do, but in how deeply you are. And then a shift happens. You start attracting different people. People who see your truth as beautiful. People who prefer your honesty over your sparkle. People who stay when your light dims. Performers are not bad. They are tired. They are aching to be loved, but too afraid to stop dancing. You don't need to join the performance. You can invite them to rest, but only if you've made space for your own stillness first. You'll know you're healing when you can say, I don't know, and feel no shame. You can disappoint someone and still feel worthy. You can be quiet, uncertain, even invisible, and still feel real. The performer taught you the cost of conditional love. Now, it's time to learn something deeper. That being lovable has nothing to do with being impressive. You are not a role. You are not a character. You are not the sum of others' reactions to you. You are a person, a soul, a presence. And the people meant for you will only find you when you take off the costume. You've seen them now. The 5 people, the same characters that keep showing up, wearing different faces. The one who abandons, the one who controls, the one who saves, the one who runs, the one who performs. And maybe, if you're honest, you've been all of them too. That's the quiet truth about wounds. They don't just attract, they echo. We live in loops. We replay stories, not because we're weak, but because the psyche is trying to complete something, to finally understand, to integrate, to become whole. Carl Jung said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This video wasn't about them. It was about you, your patterns, your pain, your beautiful, painful, sacred longing to be whole. And now that you've seen the pattern, you can stop repeating it, not overnight, not perfectly, but gently, one moment at a time. You pause when you're tempted to chase. You notice when you're overgiving. You speak when you used to stay silent. You walk away when it costs too much to stay. You stop looking for someone to complete you and start becoming the person who no longer needs completion. You meet your wounds with compassion, not shame. You stop asking, "Why does this keep happening to me?" and start asking, "What part of me is still asking to be seen?" And from that place, a new life begins. You start attracting people who don't trigger your trauma, but mirror your healing. People who stay, who listen, who love you not for who you perform to be, but for who you already are. The work is not easy, but it is sacred because in healing yourself, you stop passing the pain forward. And in doing so, you change everything. The pattern ends with you.